It's BC for Get Lowered, and today we're going to talk about the suspension setup on your Harley-Davidson touring bike. Now, if you own a pre-2014 Harley-Davidson touring motorcycle, you're probably familiar with these shocks. These are okay, but they're not great. A lot of people really gripe about them. I don't think that the gripes are necessarily totally warranted, but there are definitely some issues to be resolved. The first of the issues is that these shocks almost invariably end up leaking. So for some people, the leak gets bad enough that they inflate their shocks to the proper pressure today, and then tomorrow they go to ride and find out that they're basically sitting on the stops again. The second problem is that these shocks were not really designed for any one specific purpose. At least it doesn't seem that way. It kind of seems like they're designed to be moderately okay at, kind of cruising some tight twisty roads and then going on 1,000-mile tours. The issue there is you can't be everything to everyone when you're designing like that. And so there are trade-offs to be made. The trade-off with this shock system is that it's just not great at any one thing. So as you're starting to have this conversation about shocks and maybe doing upgrades and maybe doing some changes to your suspension system, it's really important to be honest with yourself about the type of riding you do instead of thinking about whether or not you may do a certain type of riding in the future. There are great suspension companies that have been doing this for years and years, Progressive or Burley or Legend, whoever it is that you decide to go with. My advice to you would be, give them a ring, drop them an email, tell them about the type of rider you are, the problems that you're trying to solve, and find out what suggestions that they have for you. In my case, the answer is the 444 system from Progressive Suspension. Now, I did go for the heavy duty because, well, I'm a big guy. And I also went for a little bit shorter shock length, as you can see here, because I'm also a short guy. So this is going to solve a couple of problems for me. Now, above and beyond anything else, the problem that it solves is I'm just not real happy with the ride from the stock suspension. But the second problem that it solves is my leg comes down about right here. Normally my calf hits the front of the floorboard here for the passenger, and then I'm burning the crap out of myself on the primary while I'm tiptoeing about right here. Now, I can kind of get the ball of one foot down while I tiptoe the other, but either way, it's just not a real confidence-inspiring position when I'm stopped. So the next step is getting the old shocks off and getting the new ones installed. It's really a pretty simple process. You got a couple of 3/4-inch bolts that hold these in, and then you disconnect your air lines, and that's all there is to removing these shocks. Now, as you probably saw, I've actually got the bike up on a lift table just because it's a little bit easier for me to deal with. You absolutely do not have to have a lift table to do this job. What you do need is some way to be able to lift the rear of the bike and lower the rear of the bike to allow yourself to adjust the travel here so that you can take the old shocks off and put your new ones on. You can do that with any standard motorcycle jack, or you can do it with a flat jack as well. You heard me talk earlier about a flat jack or an ATV jack. I call this a flat jack. It's a scissor jack. It sits underneath the frame members, as you can see right there. And you can place it either forward on the bike or maybe back of the bike, depending on which end of the bike you need to get up off the ground. And so basically what this allows me to do is by turning this handle and lifting the bike up, I can relieve some pressure on this back wheel so I can get those bolts out. Okay, as you can see, I've got both the bolts out, got the shock pulled, and the little air line pulled off of it as well. And that was pretty easy. Now, are you ready for a pro tip? So it's not really a pro tip, it's just a tip, but that's what counts, right? So here's the deal. A lot of people will take off one shock and then they'll go immediately put on the new shock. Well, here's the problem with that. If you're moving to a different size shock than what you have on the other side, then your wheel travel is going to be different. And that's exactly the case with me. I'm moving from a 13-inch shock, which is the stock size, to a 12-inch shock. So right now I'm going to have to take off this other shock, and then we can adjust where the wheel is sitting in order for me to install the new ones. All right, so now that we've got the shocks off of the bike, it's time to put the new ones back on. And as you can see, I've actually got one here that's assembled and ready to go, but I wanted to show you how we got to this point. So when you get the shocks, they're going to come looking just about like that. And you're also going to get a packet of hardware. It has a bunch of assorted spacers and washers and things of that nature. And for my particular bike, I have to use these two larger collared spacers, one on each end of the shock. Now, one thing that I've heard people talk about in the past that's kind of a pain with these is that those collared spacers don't like to fit through these holes. And so a little trick for you, something that I've just found that works really well, is if you take a thin gauge socket wrench or a screwdriver or whatever tool that you can slip that collared spacer over it, and then you can take that and push it directly into the hole, just like this. One more time here, and as you can see, once you've got a little bit of leverage there, they slide in pretty easy. So just make sure that they're sitting flush up against the shock itself, and then you can go ahead and go to your next step on your instructions, which walks you through exactly how you're gonna have to set this up. Now on my bike, and it may be different on yours, but what Progressive calls for on my bike is to have the stock lock washer, then a 1/2 inch washer on this bolt. And then this bolt slides through just like that. Now, it also comes with a package of these black spacers. The whole deal with these black spacers is when you go to screw these bolts back into their place, if you find that you've got a little bit of wiggle room, these spacers are there to take care of it for you. You may not have to use them. You may have to use all of them. It'll depend entirely on your bike. I've just kind of started this by hand here. I'm just hand tight. But here at the bottom is the problem that I was telling you about earlier. I'm going from a 13-inch shock to a 12-inch shock. And as you can see, this hole does not line up at all. So now we have to let the bike down just a little bit with our scissor jack in order to get that hole to line up for us. That should be pretty good right there. I'll put my spacer in here, put my bolt in, and see where we sit. If you are not able to start these things just by hand, if you have to put any kind of pressure at all, adjust your jack. Do not try to force these things in, because the last thing you want to do is end up stripping out one of these bolts, or end up stripping out, even worse, something on the swing arm or on the frame. Now, as you're tightening these, don't crank them down real hard. The factory torque spec on these is only 35 to 40 pound-feet of torque. So 35 to 40 is actually not a ton. So just get them in here nice and snug and then finish it off with the torque wrench. What Progressive calls for is 1 inch of sag. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna grab yourself a tape measure, and you're gonna measure from a known spot. Like in this case, the top of this bolt is nice and flat for me. So we're gonna go from the top of this bolt down to the ground, and then we're gonna measure what that is. Then I'm gonna sit on the bike, and we're gonna measure that again. If that's more than 1 inch, we need to turn this clockwise, which is going to stiffen up this spring and get rid of some of that sag. So it's going to be a little bit of a trial and error process for you, but it's not hard to do, and it's important because that's basically the whole secret of these, is being able to set your sag correctly and have a set of springs that are going to give you the performance that you want for the type of riding that you do. So let's talk about the end result of these 444s and losing 1 inch of height. Now before, when I was sitting still on the motorcycle, I was pretty much up on the tiptoes on both sides. Obviously, not exactly the most comfortable position to be in, and didn't inspire a whole lot of confidence. Now, since installing the 444s, and I only went down 1 inch, I can actually comfortably flat foot the bike on one side, while maintaining a good ball of the foot position on the other. For me, as a rider with shorter legs, that means that I'm now incredibly comfortable in a way that I never could have been with the stock suspension. Another big deal for me is just the overall difference in feeling of the motorcycle. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you that the first couple of rides on this bike kind of worried me a little bit because I thought something was wrong. When I first started riding Harley-Davidson motorcycles, one of the things that was most striking to me coming from the sport bike world was exactly how much effort it took to make a Harley kind of comfortably lay into a turn. Since installing the 444s on the rear, it's definitely a whole different ballgame now. The bike now wants to dip into turns in a way that it never had before. Now that I've put a couple 100 miles onto this suspension setup, I can tell you I am in love with it. I did have to do a little bit of trial and error with the preload adjustment. I ended up at about 2.5 turns, where initially I thought I would be at about 2. I went up to about 4 and it was suddenly really stiff, and then I backed it down until I landed at about the 2.5 mark, and now things feel really comfortable. You'll notice that I even have my 2-up touring seat on this bike right now. This seat sits pretty high and it's kind of wide as well, so I don't have the best reach with it. After putting the progressive suspension onto this bike, I feel in complete control at all speeds. I don't feel like I have to fight against the motorcycle anymore when I'm having to back out of a parking spot or if I'm walking the bike forward. It just feels comfortable. I'm really interested to see what happens in a few thousand miles with these springs. I want to see if I get any kind of decrease in height or if the rate needs adjustment at all. You can rest assured that I'll be filming another video here in a few months to let you know what happened. So there you have it. I'm BC for Get Lowered. Check out the full line of suspension products and much more at getlowered.com.